But yeah, this episode is Friday the 13th, axe murder.
Jason Voorhees.
What?
Jason Voorhees. Friday the 13th.
Oh, okay. This isn't that. Okay.
Do you know who Jason Voorhees is?
Is he the guy in the mask?
He is.
Yes.
He's currently on my wallpaper, actually.
Gosh. Me and Josie have decided to have a horror weekend, and we're going to watch the Saw films.
Oh, I love those.
Oh, I love those so much. I haven't the first original one I haven't seen in so many years, but I remember it being fantastic, and I kind of remember some of the other ones later on, but the first one I can't really remember at all. So we're gonna I think tonight we're starting. Right.
Oh, do you realise?
Oh, you've ruined it.
Too late now. Too late. Do you realise on our Halloween episode we didn't say morning?
Oh,
I know. I realised when I was doing the edit for it, and I thought normally this is where I would put the intro music in, and then I'd get ready. And I was like, why aren't we saying it? Why aren't we saying?
That's like Harry Potter and the Time Turner. It's like, why aren't I going?
Why aren't I leaving? Yeah. And I was like, what's happening? Why aren't we saying morning? And then we started talking about the Salem witch trials, and I was like, oh, we didn't say morning.
Right. Well, on behalf of myself and Kate, we sincerely apologise, and you can have a double good morning today. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah. Did you know in South Africa, as a standard, they say morning, morning?
Oh no.
Yeah. Morning, morning.
Morning, morning.
Oh. Morning, morning. Yeah, I felt right at home over there.
Oh, I must have been like South African in another life.
Do you reckon?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
It's the only obvious answer. Morning, morning, everyone.
Morning, morning.
And to everyone in South Africa, morning, morning.
Yeah, I tell you what, we've got some listeners in South Africa, and yeah, and they were just the nicest people.
Oh, really?
I mean, I don't know if our listeners are nice people, but just everybody that I met in South Africa.
I'm sure they are.
I'm sure they are, because everybody that I met in South Africa was just so lovely and so happy. It's just so smiley.
Love smiley people.
I mean, it was beautiful. It's a beautiful country. So had I lived there, I also would be incredibly happy and smiley.
True.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our listeners, they have to be delightful people, because we've still got a considerable amount of we've now got a considerable amount of listeners, and we are, what is this, 48 episodes in?
Yeah. So thank you guys. I do also, while we're on the subject of being appreciative, I posted on Instagram the other day about a pay it forward kind of thing. You know, we have ways to support the podcast, and you know, you can donate to the buy us a coffee page, or you can subscribe and get the additional content, and but you can also support the podcast for absolutely nothing. It won't cost you a penny. You just need to tell one person about the podcast. If all of our listeners just told one person about our podcast, it would mean so much, and it just kind of it spreads the joy to everybody else.
Oh yes, spread the joy.
Spread the joy.
Yeah. So tell one person, and what, force them to listen?
Yeah.
You left that bit off.
Yeah. Don't just tell them. Lock them in a room, put some earphones on.
Yeah. And say, listen, every week you listen. Yes. No, that's true. Pay it forward and do something nice. Spread our dulcet tones all around the world.
Our Essex accents.
Yeah. All right.
What, mate?
What?
Right, I'm getting in there again. Random blam. Go.
Oh, do you know what? I can't think of a single one. All right. I'm gonna have to think about it then. Hang on.
No, that's not how we play the game.
Well, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do or say. God's sake. Random blam. I've done all my random blams. I'm not an interesting person.
This is where you insert like a what's one of those rolly not windmill things, but the tumbleweeds.
I shall insert a rolly windmill. Oh God. No.
This is the longest anyone's ever taken.
I'm just going to shut down for a minute. I've got an arcade machine in my house.
Yeah, you do.
There you go. That was worth the wait.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Well done. Okay. We haven't recorded for about 3 or 4 weeks, have we?
No.
So I've been preparing.
Got a whole list of random blams.
Because I listened to a few of our episodes. I was like, oh my God, I'm such a dweeb. So here is a random blam for you. I have got 15 tattoos.
Have you really?
I do indeed. Yes, I did have 14, but I treated myself to a new one whilst in South Africa.
Oh, did we now?
I did, yeah.
Are we going to see it? Ooh. Is that a whale tail?
Whale tail.
Oh.
Yeah, because
walled off Josie getting eaten by one. That's like you've had a tattoo of Josie's like biggest fear.
last moments. No, so we went to Hermanus in South Africa, and it's like the most famous place that you can watch the whales. So we would just be sitting eating breakfast, and the reason that the whales like being there is because it's like the sea is the same depth. It doesn't like come in, there's not shore. There is obviously in some places, but where we've seen the whales, so they come right up to the edge, and they're huge. And it was calving season, so it was mummy and babies, and all up at the top and spoofing out all of their spouts. Shoof!
Is that the technical term?
Shoofing up all their spouts, blowing their. Oh, I was going to say blowing their load.
Stop! Stop!
Sorry, no, just blowing off some steam. And their towels are always just out all the time. So we got a little
the same.
Yeah.
Go swimming, tail out.
We got a little memento from our time in South Africa. We went to a tattoo studio called African Gangster. And he was amazing, actually. Really, really good.
Was he an African gangster?
I think so.
Authentic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's a nice tattoo as well. I like the little stars above it as well.
Yeah, it's cute, isn't it?
Yes, very cute.
So this week's episode is actually a listener request.
Is it indeed?
It is indeed, and it was from a lovely lady called.
Hang on, 2 seconds. Whoa. We didn't say morning again.
We did. We just done like 4 mornings in a row.
Yeah, but that was our apology for our Halloween episode.
Right.
So we've just done random blams. Random blams done.
Morning.
See, that was worth it.
Yeah. So this week's episode was actually a listener request. So I put a little post out on the socials and said, you know, we like hearing from you guys, and because I know that I generally pick stories that obviously interest me. And you pick stories that obviously interest you.
I do.
So I wanted to hear from the people about what stories interested them, and if there was any they wanted us to cover. And lovely lady Karen.
Hey Karen.
She she said about a case that was perplexing to her that happened in her hometown in Wiley in Texas.
Oh, that sounds like a cool place.
Yeah, I know. So I did a little research in, and it was a very perplexing case indeed. So I delved right in.
Got right in there.
Here it is. This is the Friday the 13th axe murder.
Ooh. Yeah. Sounds right up my street.
Yeah.
Wish I had something to eat.
Phone. Josie?
I think she's gone upstairs.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
How do you think that? Where are you?
I'm upstairs. I'm in the house. Because I saw her go past you and go upstairs.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, well, the shadow of her. I'm assuming it was Josie. If not, there's someone upstairs.
Get out of there.
You're like, hang on, Josie's in the kitchen with me. I'm like,
Josie left hours ago. So, Candice Candy Montgomery moved to Wiley, Texas in 1977 with her husband of 8 years, Pat Montgomery, and their 2 children, Jennifer, who was 8 at the time, and Ian, who was 4. They were a respectable family. They had a small bit of wealth. They weren't like millionaires or anything, but Pat worked as an electrical engineer, and I can't remember where he worked for, like quite a prestigious company, and so he earned quite a lot of money. So Candy was able to be a stay-at-home mum. So Candy was she was very petite. She was blonde, she was petite, she was obviously quite thin. She's described as having a pointed nose and a contagious high-pitched laugh, which made her easy to be around. I always find if somebody laughs easily, it's kind of infectious, isn't it? I that's why I hang around with Claire a lot, because she laughs a lot at what I say and it makes me feel good about myself. So there. I like people that laugh easily because it makes me feel good about myself.
She's not like that at home.
No, it's because you're not funny. So yeah, people kind of gravitated toward Candy, and she was quickly welcomed into the community as she became a much loved member of the church. And I think that was quite a big thing in Wiley in Texas, was the church. Everybody that went to the church seemed to have like a buzzing social life. And it just seemed like that's the place to be.
Because they socialized with like the church, their church family sort of thing.
What?
What?
I was going to agree with you, but I didn't know what you meant.
Like they've got a good social life because they all socialize together. Like,
yeah, so they did like they had a church choir, and they played squash together, and they had such a great time. But Candy, by all means, was just a normal housewife. She was a loving mother to her 2 children, and she was a devoted wife to her husband. But shortly after moving to the area, Candy became friends with Betty Gore. They met at the church. Betty was a middle school teacher. So Betty lived near the Montgomery family. She lived with her husband, Alan, and their daughter, Elisa, who was 7 years old. Betty was an attractive woman. She'd been growing up, she'd been a typical, or what I think of as a typical American high school student. She was popular, the cheerleader, that sort of typical American high school student. She had a lot of friends, and she was quite easy to get on with. And she met her husband in college. He'd actually been her maths teacher. So while she was in college, Alan was a maths teacher, so he was obviously a little bit older than her.
Oh,
and
yeah. Sorry, that just clicked into place then. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. So, but Alan, it kind of, her whole family didn't really get the pairing. He was obviously older than her, and she'd been this really attractive teenager. And Alan was the opposite of Betty. He was quiet and he was shy, and because he was quiet and shy, I think that was often misconstrued as kind of rudeness, and people sort of said that he was a little bit standoffish.
Yeah.
And he's described as being a plain man, which that's not how I think, if anyone was going to describe me, that's not how I'd want to be described as. Plain.
No, not plain.
He was a plain man with a receding hairline, and in the description it said horn-rimmed glasses, which I always take as Harry Potter glasses. Always.
No, I think it's like these.
Oh, are they?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Oh, well, they're not Harry Potter glasses, are they? Anyways, so he was
no.
He was the opposite of Betty. He wasn't really anything to kind of write home about. But Betty, after the birth of her first daughter, she suffered a bout of depression, like postnatal depression, and she became this kind of anxious person. So when she met Candice,
an anxious Persian.
I'm just going to do that bit again because I keep making mistakes.
Become an anxious Persian.
He didn't, no. So after the birth of her first child, Elisa, Betty suffered a bout of postnatal depression, and she became this anxious person that she hadn't been before. So when she met Candy at the church, and Candy was outgoing and she was easy, that is kind of what Betty needed. So they became quite good friends quite quickly. It wasn't long before their friendship kind of they became best friends, and the pair's children also became best friends. So they were at very similar age, and they also became best friends. So within a year of moving to Wiley, Candy, who was 28, had told one of her friends, not Betty, just a different friend at her church, that her relationship with her husband Pat was kind of stale. Candy was an avid romance novel reader, and I don't know if you've ever read romance novels.
Nah.
They are filled with quite lustful, passionate relationships, and that's what Candy wanted. Candy kind of lost herself in these romance novels, and she was hungry for that passion that was always in these books. And she said to her friend that she wanted, air quotes, fireworks in the bedroom, which are dangerous.
Yes.
So one evening, while playing volleyball at the local church, she accidentally bumped into Alan Gore, who is Betty's husband. And when I say bumped into him, I actually physically bumped into him while I was playing volleyball. They went to get the same ball and they collided. And it was only a small collision, so nobody else kind of really, noticed anything or thought anything of it. But for Candy, it stirred up this kind of that all of these feelings that she wanted, that passion and that romance. And she said that when she bumped into him, she smelled him and he smelled sexy. So she was like, I want to probably smell sweaty from playing volleyball.
Yeah.
But so she'd known Alan for only 9 months.
She smelled him.
Well, you do, didn't you? If you run into someone.
I wouldn't like bump into someone and like sniff them.
No, I know. I really appreciate anybody that smells nice. So if I'm walking past someone and someone smells nice, I generally go, "Oh my God, you smell amazing."
Yeah, I do tell people.
Yeah,
I will say to people like, "Oh, God, you smell really nice." Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Nobody ever says that about me.
I think I've said that about you before.
That'd be nice. But yeah, so when she bumped into Alan, she caught a whiff of him and she was like, "Oh, that's really nice." And then after that, she kind of then become a little bit obsessed with him. So she'd known Alan for 9 months. So since moving to Wiley, they'd met at the church. The same, obviously, it was Betty's husband. And he actually was a lot like her. He was more like her than Betty was. He was very active in the church. He had a really good sense of humour, quite similar to Candy's. And they just got along really well. Alan sang in the choir, as did Candy, and he helped organise the sports teams, and he did a lot more than Betty did. So they generally spent time together without their respective partners. So they was alone quite a lot. And Candy started to fantasize about Alan, and she convinced herself that he was also thinking the same things that she was. So I think because the more you kind of think something, the more you look for reasons to believe that what you're thinking is real. So she noticed that Alan was kind of a little bit flirty with her, more so than any of the other women at the church. And he teased her about her volleyball skills, and they stayed together after choir practice, just to talk. And he would give her these like little sly winks on the side. And she took that to mean that he was kind of thinking what she was thinking. And it was almost like a little secret between them both. He had no idea what she was thinking, by the way.
Oh, really?
But she was fed up of feeling sexually frustrated, is how she put it. She was young, she was 28, and she didn't want to feel like she was missing out. So she decided to do something about it. So one evening after choir practice, she told Alan that she wanted to talk to him about something. And she was quite open. She was quite blunt. She told him that she was very attracted to him. She said, I'm just going to put it out there, Alan. This is how I'm feeling. I don't know if I want to do anything about it, but I thought I'd let you know. And then before he had time to kind of react or take in what she'd said, she left. She dropped the bomb, and then left.
I thought you were going to say she like pounced on him.
No.
Like, look, I like you. I'm just putting it out there. I don't know how you feel about it, but bam. Yeah, she was on him. Yeah.
She did not do that.
Okay, she left.
But yeah, so she said all of that and then she left. So Alan was obviously quite shocked because they were both married, happily, or so he thought. He loved his wife. And he was very shocked that, you know, Candy and Betty were great friends. So he was quite like, oh, that's a bit of a betrayal there.
Yeah.
And he did love Betty, but he kind of was like, you know, things could be better. His sex life with Betty had kind of ground to a halt. And he found himself kind of feeling a little bit pleased, and a little bit smug, maybe, that another woman was interested in him sexually. It kind of fed his ego.
Yeah, it's flattering, isn't it? No matter what, no matter how happy you are in a relationship, if someone else finds you attractive and, you know, appealing, it's flattering.
Yeah, and that's
I get it all the time.
Do you really?
All the time.
Oh gosh, I don't. Yeah, so that's exactly what it was. Candy was an attractive woman, and she was by far the most attractive woman at the church. And the fact that she had come on to him, he was like, oh, look at me go.
Yes.
So a week or so after the choir practice, Alan saw Candy again. It was after another church volleyball game. Alan and Candy stayed to clean up the gymnasium where they'd been playing. And then afterwards, they walked out to the parking lot together. When they reached Candy's car, Alan kind of brought up the subject again, and he asked Candy, what did she have in mind? Candy was like, get in my car. Let's have a little word. So they just sat in the car together, and she quite bluntly just said to him, would you be interested in an affair? Yep. He loved his wife very much, and he said to Candy, you know, I don't think so.
No, mate.
No, mate. No. I don't think it would be fair to her, because years prior to this, Betty had actually had an affair with another man. And so he said, I know how much that hurts, and I wouldn't want to cause Betty that same hurt.
Oh, good.
Which is nice.
Good man. Good man.
Nope.
A good man
then.
At the moment.
Candy also was like, yeah, no, you're right. I do love my husband, and I don't want to hurt him either. But she just couldn't get this idea of an affair out of her mind. And she said she thought that by voicing it, it would kind of get it out of her system. You know, when
Mm.
you've got something in your head and it's kind of in there, it's not until you kind of verbalize it that you go, right, that's done now. I
Yeah.
can move on.
Yeah.
So she thought, if I just voiced it aloud, then that would get it out of my system and I can move on. So they both agreed to put it to bed.
Good.
Not literally.
Yeah. The opposite.
The opposite. They decided not to go to
Take
bed.
it out of bed. Get
But
out.
they both agreed that, you know, that's the end of it. They won't mention it anymore.
Good.
But Alan gave her a small kiss on the lips as he was leaving the car.
Oh, Alan, what are you thinking?
And to say that she was a little bit sore about the rejection was a little bit of an understatement. She was embarrassed and she was hurt by Alan's rebuffal. Because
Good
she
word.
Thank you. That I didn't even write that down. That's not even in the script. I just
Proud of you.
I just got that. Yeah. Thank you. So she generally she was quite attractive. I've mentioned that. So she thought that she could have any man that she wanted. She generally thought if she brought up this idea of an affair, then he would not say no. So rejection wasn't normal to her. So she was a little bit, you know, sore about it. But she was also worried that Alan would tell Betty and other members of the church, and her reputation that she'd built up since being there, this reputation of being a good, loving housewife, would be ruined. But 2 weeks later, she received a phone call out of the blue from Alan.
Hello.
He told Candy that he was going out of town on business and wondered if she would meet him for lunch to discuss what they had discussed before.
Well, they'd already discussed it, Alan, so why do you need to discuss it again?
Yeah.
Alan.
Candy was intrigued, so she agreed. So they met at a tea shop and they discussed everything but the thing that they had discussed before. So they spoke about, you know, their respective partners. They spoke about her husband and his wife and their interests and their hobbies. And it wasn't until they
random blams.
Random blam. Go.
Yeah.
That should be a date thing. Yeah. Without the other party knowing what's going on. Just right, okay, yeah. How are you? Random blam, go.
Yeah, and they'll be like, I'm married. Oh.
It's like Friends, all the questions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who would you rather sleep with?
Rachel.
Yeah, so it wasn't until the end of their meal, when they was just kind of getting all their stuff together, ready to leave, that Alan actually brought up the subject of the affair. They discussed how they would go about it. They discussed not wanting to be caught. They discussed that it would be purely sex. They didn't want any feelings to get involved. They just wanted to have a good time. They wanted it to be strictly no strings attached because, you know, it would get complicated. They discussed
feelings always get involved.
Always. They discussed any sort of hazards that, you know, they might face, and then they would then discuss how they would overcome these hazards. And they had this like pros and cons list that they went through, which is just what you want.
Yeah, it's very organized for
it was. I think later down in my notes,
affair.
Oh look, it says over the next month they meticulously planned out their affair. But yeah, so over the next few weeks, Alan, he kind of started to grow much more comfortable with the idea of an affair. The more they discussed it, the more he was on board with it. Mainly because he discovered that he could quite easily go to lunch with Candy. He could quite easily talk to her on the phone quite intimately. They were flirty and you know, talking about naughty things on the phone. And then he would go home to Betty and it would be absolutely fine. It would be completely normal. And she had no idea that he was doing any of these. And he was quite confident that he wouldn't get caught. So over the next month, they meticulously planned out their affair because, you know, there's nothing more sexy than meticulously planned out sex, is there?
Way to kill the spontaneity.
Yes, it was detailed down to what food they would have.
Oh goodness.
Alan was concerned about the possibility of becoming emotionally attached. He said he still had doubts about whether to go ahead or not, but Candy assured him that that wouldn't happen. So she said, she was like, I just want a bit of fun. And if that does happen, then this is what we'll do. So the couple had rules, and these are the rules.
Okay.
If either one of them wanted to end the affair for whatever reason, it would end. No questions asked. If either one of them became too emotionally involved, the affair would end. If they ever started taking risks that shouldn't be taken, the affair would end. All expenses, food, motel room, gasoline would be shared equally. They would meet only on weekdays while their spouses were at work. Candy would be in charge of fixing lunch on the days they met so that they could have more time. So Alan, they were basically going to do it in, I say do it, I mean literally do it, in Alan's 2-hour lunch break.
Oh.
So they wanted the whole 2 hours. They didn't want to have to waste time going out and getting food. So Candy was in charge of making food to take. And it wasn't just like a couple of sandwiches or something. It was like a proper buffet of food that she would prepare to take to this weird affair.
I mean, she sounds great.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want that? A buffet of food brought to you.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah. Right.
Candy would be in charge of getting the motel. And they would meet on a Tuesday or a Thursday once every 2 weeks. And that was because Candy, her little boy attended preschool. So after much deliberation, Alan finally decided to go ahead with the affair, and a date was set for the December the 12th, 1978. So,
I didn't realise it was so long ago. 1978.
Yeah. Yeah, they moved. Did I not say that they moved to Texas in 1977?
Probably, yeah.
Oh, if not, they moved. This is set in the 70s.
No, you probably did. Yeah.
There was a lot of detail about their meetup, but I've decided that it's kind of irrelevant. So I won't go into details about what the pair decided to do. Once they met up, obviously they started the affair, and they decided to meet up a week later for more of the same.
Same of what?
The buffet.
What did they do? What did they do?
Right, well, so it said that Candy, they kind of ate the food and then they sat on the bed for ages, and neither one of them kind of wanted to make the first move. But Alan decided to approach Candy, and this is very 70s. Candy said that when they kissed, it was quite clear that Alan had never French kissed anybody.
Oh, really?
So I think it was all quite PG, perhaps.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think she got the fireworks that she was looking for. I got the impression that he was a little bit naive in the bedroom. And he obviously hadn't experienced anything like Candy before. So he was like, wow, that was great. Let's do that again. And Candy was like, oh, well, we've started it now. We might as well.
Yeah. So he got
more out of it, I think, than what she did.
Okay.
But nevertheless, the affair carried on for 6 months. During that 6 months, Betty was pregnant with their second child.
Oh.
So Alan had started to worry that Betty would go into labour, and that he would be with Candy at the time. And he was saying that, if she rings and she's in labour and I'm with you, that's he would just feel terrible. So
and also, how's she going to contact him?
Phones. They did have phones.
Yeah, what? While he's at a hotel, though.
Oh well, yeah. That's what he means. Like if you tried to contact him while he was with her, she wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't know that she was going into labour. So, but he spoke to Candy about his feelings, and then they both agreed to put the affair on hold. So Betty gave birth to their second daughter, Bethany, in July 1979. And all was well with the Gores for a few months. Candy even organised Betty's baby shower.
Oh, goodness.
Which,
no shame.
No shame. However, the phone calls and the meetups with Candy began again shortly after. The affair had kind of turned into a relationship. From all the, everything that I've read, it was more of a relationship than an affair. They'd started getting quite reckless, and it seemed that Betty was getting a little bit suspicious about Alan. After an unhappy few months, Betty suggested to Alan that they go to marriage counselling. So I think what happened was Alan had been with Candy one evening. They'd had their meet up, they had their affair. He then went to work and he came home. And that evening, Betty decided that she wanted a little bit of sex. And he was like, "Oh,
not again.
Shit. I'm spent." So he kind of politely tried to put her off. And she took that as a massive sign of rejection. She was really deeply hurt by it.
Yeah.
And so she kind of fell into a bit of a depression. And then she kind of suggested this marriage counselling to Alan. And while they was at marriage counselling, I think it took place over a weekend, Candy babysat the children.
Wow.
While it's very backwards, he babysat the children while they went to work on their marriage. But while they was away, he kind of was like, what, I do love my wife and what I'm doing is wrong. So when he returned, I think Candy got the sense that was what was going to happen. So she actually suggested that the pair end their affair. And she said to Alan, I won't call you. I won't bother you. Let's just get on with our lives. And all was quiet with the two families for a whole year. The pair carried on their lives as if nothing had happened. Until the day of Friday the 13th of June 1980. The morning went by in a blur for Candy, and it was one of those mornings where you'd driven somewhere, but you wasn't sure how you got there.
Yeah.
She knew that she needed to pick up her children from a puppet show that they'd gone to at the church. And she was also collecting Alan and Betty's daughter, Elisa, because she was taking her to the movies with her that evening. And then they were having a sleepover. Meanwhile, Alan was away on a business meeting. And he'd gotten worried that he couldn't get hold of Betty. He said that Betty was suffering some postpartum depression, and she absolutely hated being left. She didn't like being alone. So her and Alan had a little bit of an argument about the fact that he had to work on a Friday and that he had to go away for work. But he said that they kind of reconciled. They had their argument and then they reconciled. And it seemed like Betty was in high spirits when he left. But after multiple unanswered calls and several hours of no word, Alan was very worried. So he just decided to call his neighbour, Richard. He asked Richard if he could knock at the house and, find out where Betty is. And Richard knocked a few times and he rang the doorbell and he didn't receive any answer. So he told Alan that it looked like she was out. But Alan, it was like that. It's been hours, that's not right. So the next thing he thought to do was to call Candy. And he asked Candy if she'd heard from Betty at all. And Candy said no, but then she disclosed that actually she'd seen Betty that morning. She'd stopped by to ask her if Elisa could come to the cinema with them that evening and have a sleepover. And Elisa had an early swimming lesson the next morning, which Candy said she was happy to take her to, but she needed to collect her swimming costume. So while Alan was on the phone, he spoke to his daughter. Candy had picked up the children from the church, and that included Elisa. So Alan spoke to Elisa and he said to her, did Mummy tell you she was going anywhere? Did Mummy mention anything? And she was like, no. So when Candy came back on the phone, he asked her, how did Betty seem? When you went round there, how did she seem? And Candy said that she seemed fine, but she kind of felt that she was in a hurry for Candy to leave. She was kind of like ushering her out of the door. And she told Alan that Betty had been sewing when she arrived. And she'd located Elisa's swimsuit. She told Candy that Elisa was quite scared. Like when they take her swimming, she genuinely was quite scared to put her head in the water. So what they would normally do is that if she did manage to put her head in the water, they would treat her with a peppermint. Can you imagine kids these days? You're like, oh, great job, well done. Here's a peppermint.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like she's a horse.
Yeah, here's peppermint. Yeah. So Betty gave Candy a handful of peppermints and said, you know, if she does that,
girl.
It's a good girl. Done. And she said, you know, if Elisa does do this, then please give her a peppermint. And then they said their goodbyes, and Candy left.
Just sounds so weird.
It really, yeah, is a bit strange. But it was the 70s.
I don't her a peppermint.
Just give her a peppermint. Loved it. But Candy said to Alan, you know, if you're worried, I can go over there. Yeah, I can go over to the house. I can check on Betty and make sure everything's okay. And Alan was like, no, don't worry. I'm just, you know, I'm worrying over nothing. So we tried to call Betty again, and again got no answer. So he called his neighbour Richard for the second time, and he said to Richard, can you just please, you know, check in the garage and make sure her car's, just see if her car's there, then I'll know whether she's out or not. So Richard kind of just leaned across the fence that they had to peer into the garage, and he said that the car is there, but the garage was open and the light was on. So Alan was kind of even more panicked by that, and he was like, she would never leave the garage door open, she would never leave the light on. So he was genuinely really worried that something had happened to her. So he started to ring the hospitals to kind of check around, and he didn't get anywhere. All the hospitals were like, no, you know, Betty hasn't come in. So he rung Candy again and just kind of went through the same thing. You know, I still can't get hold of Betty. I don't know where she is. Have you heard from her? And Candy's like, no. Do you want me to go and check? And he was like, no. So in the end, he rung Richard again for the third time. And he said to Richard, can you physically go over to the house, please? Can you just check the house in case she has left and she's left a note somewhere, you know, or she's, you know, there's evidence that she's left in a hurry. Can you just please go and check the house? And Richard actually had a set of keys because he was a realtor, and he'd sold them that house 3 years prior. So he thought that perhaps he still had a spare key on that set of keys. But Alan was in such a panic that he also called one of his other friends, Jerry, who he explained the situation to Jerry, and Jerry agreed to go over to the house as well. But Jerry also rung his friend, who just happened to be Alan's neighbour on the other side. So he agreed to meet Jerry at the property. But before they went into the house, Jerry and the other neighbour, they came across Richard. Richard was kind of looking for his keys and trying to go into the house. And they was all like, what are you doing here? And they was like, what are you doing here? So they all kind of was like, well, you know, Alan's rung me to try and check on Betty, and that he was like, yeah, me too. So they kind of resolved their, you know, fusion, and they all decided that they would just enter the home together and search for Betty. But Richard looked through his keys and realised that he didn't have a spare key to the front door.
Oh, Richard.
I know. God. So they was kind of looking around for windows that they could break into, but Richard tested the front door and found that the front door was unlocked. Oh. So the three men entered through the front door.
Terrifying.
Now, all of the rooms branched off of the main hallway. So as you open the front door, you had the hallway, and then room, all off the side of the hallway on the left and on the right.
Okay.
And all of the men found that the doors were shut on all of the bedroom, or all of the doorways. So they opened the first door that they came to, and they found that it was Elisa's bedroom. They knew that it was Elisa's bedroom. It was a typical girl's bedroom, and it was neat and it was tidy, but it was empty. The next door that they opened was the door to the bathroom. Now, as they peered in, Richard said he saw something that was red and dried, and it was caked onto the bathroom wall. Ew. And it kind of gut instinct, Jerry was like, something's not right. Something's not right here. But they continued through the house and they opened the third door. And from the doorway, Richard could hear the hoarse screaming, crying of little baby Bethany in her crib. So they opened the door, they went in, and she was half sitting and half lying. Her legs were kind of like folded under her. Her face was red and blotchy because she'd just been screaming. And she was exhausted. She was crying and she was, tear streaked, dirty tear streaks and snot and all sorts. So it was quite evident that she'd been there for quite a while screaming. So Richard scooped her up and he ran back to his house to call the police, and he left Jerry and the other neighbour, Lester, to continue the search for Betty. As Richard left, Jerry and Lester went into the master bedroom, where again it was neat and it was tidy and they didn't find anything. They entered the living area and Jerry went into the dining room on the right while Lester took the kitchen, which was on the left. And they walked slowly, they were looking for anything that out of place, and they kind of turned the lights on as they went and sort of searched the area for any clues as to where Betty could be. Now, both of them said that there was this increasing pungent odor that seemed to follow them through the house. So as they made their way further into the house, the smell was getting stronger and stronger. And Lester made his way through the kitchen and into the utility room, where he screamed out to Jerry and he said, "Don't go any further. She's blown her head off."
Oh.
So in the utility room, lying in what they described was a lake of thick, congealed blood, was the mutilated body of Betty Gore.
Oh no.
The police arrived on scene shortly after the discovery, and they confirmed that Betty had in fact not been shot, but had been brutally murdered with an axe, which they found in their search of the home, and it was half buried under the fridge.
Oh.
In the home, they also found a bloody footprint on the bathroom bath mat, a bloody fingerprint, and hair in the shower. It was quite evident that the killer had taken a shower before they left. So they had quite a lot of sort of like physical evidence at the home.
That's the most brutal way to kill someone, I think.
Oh, I couldn't. At that and being hit with a hammer.
Yeah.
Something. Being hit with an axe or a hammer, I just can't physically think how you would. Oh, I know. But an autopsy revealed that Betty had been struck 41 times with this 3-foot axe. 28 of the blows had been directed at her head and her face, and the rest were to her arms, torso and legs, and she had defensive wounds on her hands. All but one of the blows were inflicted while she was still alive.
Oh, I was just about to say, I hope like the first blow killed her. And then you said about defensive wounds.
Yep.
Oh God, that's so awful.
40 times she'd been hit with this axe before she died.
Oh, imagine being hit in the face and the head with an axe.
I don't want to.
Yeah, but you're making me.
Sorry. So Alan was quickly ruled out as a suspect because he was away on business. He'd been on a flight. There were multiple witnesses. He was on a business trip. So he was quite quickly ruled out. Okay. He had, however, mentioned to police that Candy had been over there that morning and that she was potentially the last person to have seen Betty alive.
Bus, Candy, Alan, throwing.
Yes. So he didn't know that he was, putting her in any sort of spotlight. She'd quite openly said to Alan, "I was there this morning and I spoke to Betty and she seemed fine." So when the police were asking him, anything about it, he was like, "Oh, Candy was there." But Candy very quickly became the prime suspect because Alan, in his police interview, actually disclosed his affair with Candy to the police. So now they actually had a motive.
Definitely.
So she was arrested for the murder, but she vehemently denied being part of it. So Candy got in touch with a friend from the church, because everybody goes to the church. And he just happened to be a lawyer, but he was I believe he was a personal injury lawyer.
Okay.
So he was a little bit out of his depth. So he he'd never really covered anything like that. So he enlisted the help of a hypnotist. He believed that Candy knew more than what she was saying, and that would come out under hypnosis. And he was correct. So by October, so a few months after Betty had died, Candy was ready to go on trial. She shocked everyone by pleading self-defense.
What, in the victim's house?
Where the victim suffered 41 axe wounds.
Yeah, and pretty much turned her head to mince.
Yes.
That's
so much so that they believed that she'd blown her head off with a shotgun.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Candy pleaded self-defense. So after 3 sessions of hypnosis, Candy's version of events unfolded. This is Candy's version of events. She told the court that she had, in fact, gone to Betty's that morning to ask if Elisa could go to the movies with them and to collect the girl's bathing suit. That is what happened. But Betty seemed annoyed. She said that she'd just put Bethany down to sleep and she was dressed to go to kind of get on with their housework. So she was dressed in her comfies and she seemed annoyed by Candy's appearance. But she offered Candy a hot drink, which Candy said she refused. And the pair talked for a little while, just, about anything, just had a little chat. They were friends. They just had a chat. And then Candy said that Betty's face went blank. And she looked up at Candy and just calmly, sort of no emotion, no facial, just really deadpan, she said to her, "Are you having an affair with Alan?"
Oh.
And Candy denied it. She was like, "No, I'm not."
Alan who? What?
Who? What? What gave you that idea?
I'm still a virgin. Oh, what?
But then Betty said to her, "Were you having an affair with Alan?" And Candy was like, yeah, she did confess to the fact that the pair had previously had an affair together.
Women always find out.
Always
find out. Always. We're always suspicious and we go with our gut instincts.
So Betty said, Candy said that Betty didn't react. She just told Candy to hold on. She was like, you just wait right there. I'll be back in a moment. And then Betty left the room. Right. And after a few moments, Betty re-entered the room holding a 3-foot axe in one hand. Now, she held it loosely with the blade pointed down at the floor. So not, holding it up or holding it aggressively, but just quite loosely holding it down beside her. And she said to Candy, "Don't see him again." And Candy was like, "I won't. It's fine. Don't worry." And she
didn't
said
want
that
her anyway.
Candy agreed to not see him again, and she actually said to Betty, "It might be better if I just bring Elisa home. I won't take her to the movies. I'll just drop her off." And Betty was like, "No, I don't want to see you again. So take Elisa to the movies, and then Alan will pick her up from you after you've taken her swimming." She said, "I don't want to see you again. So do not bring her back here." Then she went through the whole, if you're going to take her swimming, here's some peppermints. This is what we do.
Yeah.
She went through that whole thing. And then she went to get a towel and she said to Candy, "Elisa's swimsuit's in the dryer in the utility room. You get that. I'm going to go and get the towel." And Candy said that while she was there, she didn't feel threatened because although Betty had an axe, her body language wasn't threatening. She, like I say, she had this axe down quite loosely. She hadn't raised her voice. It didn't come across as menacing or anything like that. But Candy said that she was actually quite worried about the fact that she'd hurt her friend. She knew that she'd hurt her friend and that upset her. So when Betty came back in with the towel and she went into the utility room, Candy kind of reached out a hand and she touched Betty's arm really gently, and just to and she sort of said, you know, I'm so sorry, Betty. I'm so sorry that this has happened. And Candy said all at once, Betty's rage just kind of exploded, and she flung Candy's arm off of her, and she picked the axe up, and then she was screaming at Candy, and she was like screaming, "Don't see my husband, you can't have him, he's mine," all of this, you know, like a banshee. And she was like, I'm the only way that this is going to work is if I kill you.
Well,
so
Betty said that.
Betty said that,
according to Candy.
This is Candy's version of events. Okay. So Betty swung the axe clumsily, and she managed to hit Candy on the head with a glancing blow, kind of with the side of the axe. And Candy said it stunned her momentarily, and she reached up to her head to kind of like, oh God, you've just hit me with the axe. And she saw that her hands were covered in blood. So when she saw that her hands were covered in blood, her terror kind of like turned to rage, and she was really angry. So the pair kind of got into a bit of a fight, and they were kind of grappling over control of this axe. And Betty managed to bring the axe down again, but she hit the floor. So she missed Candy, but she kind of brought the axe down in the fight, and she hit the floor, but she managed to catch Candy's toe. So Candy had, I saw a picture of it, and she just had like a cut on her toe, kind of through her toenail. It just looks like a little tiny cut.
Right. So I imagined her to like chop her toe off or something.
You would think if you'd been hitting the toe with an axe, it would be quite significant, but it wasn't. It was a very minimal cut.
Which toe?
The second one from the big toe.
Oh, like your long one.
Yeah. So had it been the same size as the rest, it probably wouldn't have got it. I only got it a little bit. So the two women were just really fighting for control of this axe. And in desperation, Betty bent her head forward to bite Candy's hand in the hope that Candy would then be like, "Ah, what are you doing?" And then release the axe. You're biting me. But with her head bent forward, Betty was kind of off balance. So Candy seized her opportunity, and she shoved the axe against Betty with all of the strength that she had. And Betty stumbled backwards, and she fell against the door of the freezer, and her feet slipped. And Candy said she seized her opportunity. And as Betty kind of struggled to regain her balance, she wasn't facing Candy. She had her back towards Candy. Now, Candy had the axe now, and she, with both hands, swung the axe and brought it down on the back of Betty's head. So Betty was obviously, propelled to the floor, and she was bleeding out everywhere. So Candy said she made a run for it, and she ran out of the utility room, and she got to the living room, and then she said that Betty slammed into the back of her. Now, I have some issues with the events, Candy's versions of things, because
there
were small bits. Okay. So having been hit in the back of the head with the axe, Betty tore through the house and tackled Candy to the ground, and then they began fighting again, and they kind of navigated their way back into the utility room towards where the axe was. And again, they fought over the axe, and Candy said any opportunity that she had, she tried to run. She tried to get away from Betty, and she tried to get out of the situation. And she was kind of often saying to Betty, I don't want Alan. I won't see him again. I'll never see him again. This is crazy. Stop this. So when Betty heard this, you can imagine the sight. There was blood dripping.
I can imagine it.
You can just picture it. Blood dripping all down Betty. And, she had severe blood loss from this wound on the back of her head. And she was clutching the axe in one hand, and she must have looked really menacing. But Candy said that Betty brought a finger up to her lips and just shushed her.
Oh, get stuffed, as if she's going to be able to do that.
And according to Candice's psychologist, this action of the shushing released a deep, like within Candy, this deep-seated rage that she'd buried from the age of 4. Having been injured by a flying glass as a toddler, Candy's mother had shushed her and told her to stop crying. So instead of comforting her, she'd gone, shh, stop making a big deal of it. And that was such a repressed memory that the action of Betty shushing her released all of these feelings, and she kind of had this disassociative episode and she was full of rage. And Candy ripped the axe from Betty's grip and she just totally and utterly destroyed Betty, bringing the axe down. Like I say, she was hit 41 times, and she said she brought the axe down until she literally couldn't anymore, until she was exhausted. She attacked Betty. And while she was on the stand testifying to all of this, she appeared upset. She had tears running down her face. But whenever she was questioned, she came across as very cold and very uncaring and very, she'd stop the tears, and very Amber Heard, actually.
Yes, yeah.
Is how she came across. Now, her story appeared to be very well rehearsed, extremely well rehearsed, and she was able to repeat the account on multiple occasions with just as much detail and with little deviation. Now, I know from me, when I tell a story, it's very different. No matter how true it is, it's very different each time. But hers was very, very scripted. And, it was found that the footprint that had been left behind in the bathroom was Candy's. The fingerprint matched Candy's. The hair that was found in the shower drain was Candy's. The fact that she'd showered afterwards, it just goes to show. But Candy also
that
did
goes
have
against self-defense, doesn't it?
Well, you would think.
Well,
but Candy also had a bandage on her toe, which personally I think she did herself, because if you're attacking someone with the axe, I think she's probably missed a little bit and hit her own toe. I don't think.
I don't think that Betty swung that axe ever
at all.
Yeah.
Police also found a pair of bloody sandals at Candy's house that Candy had shredded. So she'd been wearing those sandals at the time. They'd been covered in blood. She'd gone home and she'd shredded them up and put them in the bin. So that's hiding evidence.
Yeah.
So there was absolutely no denying that Candy was the culprit.
Yeah.
Candy had murdered Betty. That they weren't denying that. It was the fact of, whether it was self-defense or not. So that was now up to a jury to decide whether they believed it was self-defense. The trial lasted 8 days. The jury of 8 women and 4 men returned their verdict after 4 hours of deliberation. Not guilty.
No! Get stuffed. Not guilty.
Candy, not guilty by reasons of self-defense.
Oh, ridiculous.
Candy was free to continue her life. The case got so much media attention. There's a documentary on it on ITV.
Oh, is there?
And yeah, and it's she's played by Jessica Biel.
Oh, okay.
So it's quite a popular documentary. I'd never heard of this case until it was brought up, but it seems it was quite, because of the absurdity of it. It was quite well documented. Candy and Pat stayed together actually after the trial, and they moved out of Texas because there was too much publicity there. But subsequently, apparently, they are now divorced. And today, Candy is living in Georgia, where she works as a mental health counsellor. Believe it or not. What I don't understand about this case is that you can plead self-defense However, there is still normally a sentence attached to that, but it's, you know, instead of it being first or second degree murder, it's then manslaughter.
Yeah.
She got absolutely nothing. She got nothing. Now, she murdered this woman horrifically, and I just don't understand why. Although
I don't know. I mean, I do believe that there are two sides to every story, and I know I can liken this to. Do you remember when Making a Murderer first came out on Netflix, and everyone went bonkers and was outraged by, you know, the fact that this guy had been put in prison for murder and he didn't do it, and, you know, and all these things. But shortly after, which was actually one of the reasons why we started this podcast, was because I just felt the need to like look into it more. And I actually found that you can download all of the court documents.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. And I started reading through, in particular, Stephen Avery's case. And there was loads of stuff in there
that
I
don't
thought,
hear about.
We didn't hear anything about that on any part of it. And also now there's another documentary that's come out, isn't there, called I can't even think what it's called, but it's basically showing the other side of the Netflix documentary about Stephen Avery.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, and I watched that, and there's all the bits from it where they were like, yes, but they never actually told you this about Stephen Avery. And, you know, but I remember reading about him being charged for like assaulting his niece or something. I'm pretty sure it's his niece.
There was didn't somebody else go missing on his property, or there was a lot of things.
There's a lot of things that they don't show you. So with trying to have an open mind about this, to me, the story that you've presented is like, what the hell? Like, how can this woman pretty much just obliterate another woman's head with an axe and walk away from it? But devil's advocate, we don't know if that is like the full story, or I just can't understand how someone could do that to another human being and then just be allowed to walk away and just be like, not guilty.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that she done all of that, but then she claimed self-defense.
Yeah.
But she didn't, she tried to cover it up.
Yeah.
She didn't go, oh my God. You know, she snapped out of this dissociative order and then gone, what on earth have I done? Let me call somebody.
Yeah.
She didn't. She destroyed evidence. And she tried to cover it up. She had a lovely phone call with Alan and was like, oh yeah, no, I saw Betty. Do you want me to go and check? Knowing full well that she was dead.
Yeah. It's a real perplexing one, that. So thank you to you for telling the story, and thank you to Karen for suggesting it. That's really perplexing. I think we might have to look into this a little bit more, because it's the most perplexing thing about this is the fact that Candy just walked away from it.
Yeah, it's when I kind of was researching it, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, Karen might have a little bit more, because if that was her hometown, you know, there's on the grapevine, she might have heard more. So if you've listened, Karen, and you don't think we've done it any justice, let me know and I will
any feedback we can
block you.
We'll block you. But no, I mean, if Karen, maybe we'll do a blam on it, and we've got another blam coming up this week.
Gosh, the John Bonet. So if you listen to the John Bonet case and you really enjoyed it, we are doing a blam discussion on the John Bonet case, and there is so much more evidence that we've got to share, and it's actually made me go, oh my God, I've got no idea actually. And I've got there's a lot of recordings, audio interviews and things like that we're going to play.
Yeah, so that John Bonet Blam is going to be out this Friday. But yeah, if we can do a Blam on this, if we can get some more information on it, maybe get Karen involved if you're up for it, Karen, because this was your fault, Karen, that all this happened. Don't just start it and walk away. Get involved.
If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.